Welcome to Focus, a productivity podcast about more than just cranking widgets. I'm Mike Schmitz. I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Mr. David Sparks. Hey, David.
Hello, Mr. Schmitz. How are you today?
Doing great. How about you?
Very excited. We've got a guest on the show. My personal Yoda is here, gang. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ernie Svenson. Ernie shaking his head no.
Hey, good to be here, as always.
Ernie, you've been a guest on the show a few times in the past, and every couple of years we got to have you in just to check out what you are up to and check in with your thoughts on Focus. Ernie is a former attorney, and him and I met a long time ago when we were speakers at the American Bar Association together. And Ernie is also, we're going to talk about that, by the way, in deep focus about recovering attorneys and being former attorneys. That's going to be a fun topic. Ernie is currently running a business called law firm Autopilot, where he helps coach lawyers to get the most out of their technology and be more focused. Ernie is definitely at the sharp end of the stick when it comes to focus. So I'm really happy to have you on the show again, buddy.
Yeah, good to be here. Good to talk to you guys as always.
I guess we should just check in a bit because law firm Autopilot's new since the last time I talked to you.
Yeah, no, it's doing well. That's the name of the company. I guess more people know it as Inner Circle. That's what I call my platform on Circle. I know Mike knows about that because he uses Circle as well, and it's a great platform. It's a great way to have a community online. And I didn't really think I was planning to build a community so much as try to help lawyers with technology, but it turns out that the best way to help people is to give them ongoing guidance, and the best way to do that is through a community. And the best things about communities are that they help each other. And so I've really enjoyed hanging out with good lawyers who are doing good things. I jokingly tell them occasionally that if I had been around that many good lawyers on a day-to-day basis, I might still be practicing law. But I don't think it would have been possible to do that on a day-to-day basis as a practicing lawyer. So I built the next best thing.
Well, I felt like when I was a lawyer, there were so few lawyers that actually got it, and I participate in your community on occasion, and it's like, this is a group of lawyers that get it. And you're right. I really wish I had that fellowship back in the day. Not only just about technology, but about focus and like life priorities. You've really made something special, Ernie, there. I'm really happy for you.
Thank you.
But one of the things you do as this coaching these lawyers is, let's just talk about lawyers as a breed. Like, that profession drags you in 1,000 different directions. I remember I was a litigator, and it just feels like you can't escape. And like, you listen to a show like this, and it's not just lawyers, people that have jobs that do that to you. You listen to a show like this and you're like, yeah, that's all fine and dandy for Mr. Content Creator. But there is a way to bring these principles to bear in a life where you're stretched in different directions. And you are dealing with people every day that face that. How do you approach that? How do you answer that question?
I think I don't answer it with words as much as I just let people see how I think about it, what I'm doing. And then if they say, well, how would I do that? I say, well, here's how I did it. Here's how I've observed other people doing it. I don't think there's a formula for getting what you want out of life. I think there's a way to approach it that will spare you a lot of the agony, maybe, or maybe not a lot, maybe, but any amount of agony that's spared is good. And I think a lot of times people want to believe that there's a very clear path that somebody else has taken that they can take exactly the same way. And I just don't think that's realistic. So I tell lawyers that. I say, you can get to where you want to be, but I can't give you a template formula. I can tell you my thought process and externalize it so you hear it. And what they hear a lot is, like, I didn't have a plan for a lot of things, which for lawyers, of course, is like, garlic to a vampire. They want to hear there's a plan. Even if I don't have a plan, they want me to make one up or tell them retroactively what my plan would have been. And I think that all sounds great, But the reality is you just have to do things and try. You know, it's creativity. This is how I look at it. It's creativity. What is creativity? You try things, they don't work, you try something else and keep doing that until you get what you want. And John Cleese, by the way, has a great book on creativity, and he was a trained lawyer, but he didn't practice. He went on to Monty Python, obviously, you know, that's all about creativity, but he talks about what creativity in the book, he talks about what it is in the book, and it's basically just try things and don't be so uptight that when something doesn't work the first time, you go, oh, well, that was a failure, I'm out of here. So if you can tolerate a little uncertainty and discomfort, you can improve in whatever realm in life, including, you know, being a lawyer.
Yeah, that book by the John Cleese book, you can read that book in a couple hours. Like the next time you have a flight, I would recommend buying that book and just read it. It's so good.
I have read that book on Ernie's recommendation and really enjoyed it. I want to unpack, if you're okay with it, the topic there of curiosity and community, because you said something about how you don't tell people this is the template, this is the way. And I feel like that is the message from a lot of quote unquote productivity gurus. So how do you think your approach being different and that whole idea of kind of chasing your curiosity has helped you foster the community? Maybe how is that different than a lot of the groups that you would see show up in this productivity space?
Well, I think that the reason I say that, and I feel confident saying it now, is because I feel like I was frustrated and kind of pissed off a lot of times when I would follow some recommendation and then realize and I wasn't mad at the person who was making it as much as myself for thinking like, why did you fall for this? It's like, you know, Charlie Brown kicking, you know, the ball. He never gets to kick the ball, but he keeps trying. And then I realized like, well, it's not going to work for me. And then I thought, well, does that work for anybody? And then I looked around and I feel like it can work for some people, or some people will say it works for them. But, you know, you can't, well, I think if you're trying to help people, you need to be brutally honest as much as possible about everything that you can be brutally honest about so that they know what they're getting into. And I think a lot of the so-called gurus, they're just slick marketers and they leave out the messy parts that people don't want to hear. And of course, that increases their sales in the short run. But over the long haul, especially if they're running a community, I'm sure they're going to have drop off because eventually people are going to realize they're not getting the results, or they were misled into believing the results were easier to obtain than they, you know, were told. And so if you just tell people, look, this is going to be kind of hard, it's going to feel awkward, and here's how it's going to feel awkward, then they're more willing to try it, especially if they're in a group of people who have all tried it and said, yeah, I felt the same way, what Ernie's saying is right, but, you know, you just got to power through it. So if it was just me saying that in the, you know, in the void, I don't think it would be as successful. But when you say it amongst a group of people who are all going to acknowledge, yeah, it was hard, you know, and that's true for everything you do. Like I'll recommend a tool like Whisperflow, which I think is great. You know, it's highly recommended in my community. And I started recommending it and people are like, I don't know. And then eventually they tried, like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing in the world. Even some of the people who gave me very explicit, detailed reasons why it wasn't suitable for them. And I'd say, well, okay, if it's not suitable for you, fine. But then they'd see everybody else talking about it. They had FOMO, they tried it, and then they tell me it was amazing. So that resistance to trying new things, I think it's kind of like, to pick another book, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, which is ostensibly only about writing, but it's really about doing anything creatively. Like there's resistance. It's uncomfortable. That's just how it is, right? And I think it's only uncomfortable to adults because as we get older, we expect perfection. Kids don't think that way. You know, that's why they're so creative. But we can all be creative if we can just suppress that nitpicky, naysaying voice that somehow comes into our heads as we get older.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things there. So there's the authenticity piece, right? I don't know it all. And people are drawn to that. But I think at a fundamental level, people still want to push the easy button and find the thing that is just going to make their life go, right?
Yeah.
Remove the resistance.
Yeah.
And it's a different kind of person, I think, who is going to seek out that resistance, to borrow another book, The Obstacle is the Way, and be okay with discomfort as part of the process of figuring things out. And I think if you get a bunch of people with that mindset together, that's really where the magic happens.
Mm-hmm. And it took a while for that to unfold. And I think an ingredient that over time worked out was me saying I don't have the answers and saying it's going to be hard because I, went against the grain. The gurus don't do that. And then I thought, well, maybe people won't like that. And they didn't. But then in the end, when they got a result and they realized my description of how it was going to be obtained, which included the statement in the beginning, it's going to feel awkward. You're not going to like the uncertainty. But then when they got through, they realized, okay, he tells me true things. And if he tells me it's worth the pain, then I'm more willing to do it the next time than I was the first time. Plus, I see all these other people that think the same way. So the community has come together. The people who didn't like that and they wanted a clear path and, wanted a quick win or whatever, they bounced off the windshield and moved on their own way. But the people who stayed are the ones who are thinking that same way. And once you have a critical mass of that kind of thinking, magical things happen.
I like to refer to it when I teach around these topics of faith and then evidence. Like if you're interested in this, at the beginning, you just have to have faith and give it a shot. And then afterwards, you can look at the evidence. But you're not going to get the evidence until after you have the faith. And it is a journey. And like a thing you said that I think really people need to hear is that it's a personal journey. Like every person has their own way through this to a fulfilling life. And as someone who for a long time felt like I didn't even have the ability to get there, and like Ernie, I read the books back in the day. I remember the 7 Habits, and I thought, boy, if I just do these 7 habits, then everything's going to fix itself. And then you get to this despair of like, well, none of this works for me. So then apparently I'm not allowed to have like an intentional life. And my argument is everybody can, even a litigation attorney or someone with that kind of craziness. But it takes work and it takes some faith and then evidence.
It's interesting, the faith statement, I now have a different context for that, or a related context, and it's because I am reading this book. It came out in the 70s by a fellow named Peter Elbow. It's called Writing Without Teachers. And he went to Oxford. He was somebody who's smart, wrote well, but he struggled to write. And he struggled to write his PhD, and he just had all this resistance and trouble. And the book is about free writing, and it was, I think, recommended by Oliver Berkman, who said, people think writing is easy. It's not as hard. Why is it hard? Because it just is. And he recommended this book and said it had been a big influence on him, or he regarded it as something people should check out. And I thought, okay, I've read a lot of books about writing, but because it's Oliver Berkman, I will take a winger on maybe this is one that's worth checking out. And sure enough, it was. And it's kind of like the Julia Cameron artist way. You just get down, write freehand for however long. And in the case of this book, he recommends starting with 10 minutes, so it's not a 3-page thing. But his explanation of why it works, it was really interesting. Because he said, people have this self-critical voice, which we've already talked about. But he said part of how you get over that is you believe in things even though you don't have a reason yet. Like you believe it's going to work out. And then you even believe kind of irrational things. And he uses the quote from Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, I've believed as many, impossible things in a day as whatever that quote is. And it's funny, I read that, I thought, I can understand that now. And he says, you have to believe in things that you don't think are going to work because what you're doing is working out what part of them are going to work. And if you say to yourself, it's not going to work, well, then you're not going to examine anything. But if you are open-minded in the face of, serious and reasonable doubt even, that's the only way you get to that other place. And I've never heard anybody say that. And he's obviously rational. He went to Oxford. And he's not saying you just make stuff up, but he's saying it's a mindset. It's a habit you have to cultivate in your mind. And when you said that about believing even though you don't know, having faith, that to me is what he was saying as well.
One of the points that you've made to me personally, and that even how I saw it on your blog site, is that the pursuit of what you're trying to teach is not efficiency, but freedom. Explain that.
Well, I've now had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people about what they wanted or what they thought they wanted. I make people fill out an assessment form and tell me what they're trying to get and what tech they use and a whole bunch of other things. And at the end is like, if there's a magic wand, you could wave it. What would you want? There's another question like, which of these things do you want? Automation, whatever. I've come to the conclusions that, and this is for the people that I can help. So maybe this is like a self-selecting cohort, but I think most people, most reasonable people, sensible, well-balanced people, once they have enough money, which is different for different people, but enough so you're not financially struggling and you feel certain confidence. They don't want more money. What they want is freedom. Freedom to enjoy their family, freedom to explore, freedom to help other people. That's what I think is built into most people. That's my spirituality. I think people want that more than they want other things that they think they want. And for a lot of people, you have to go after those things, get them, realize they don't make you happy or maybe even make you miserable, realize that they don't make anybody else happy and make them miserable. And then you kind of think, wait a second, why am I doing this? And I fell into that trap. I went to work in a, medium-sized to big firm in New Orleans, and the people were great. It was a great firm, and I have no problem with the firm. But collectively, in an organization like that, it's all about making money, improving profits, all that chest-puffing stuff that lawyers get involved in. And I fell into it because when you're surrounded by it, it just becomes the air you breathe and it infects your mind. And when I got away from it, which was, I didn't do it intentionally in the way that I would have wished I had, but whatever. A bomb went off and I was blown clear of the crater and, I dusted myself off and that's where I was. And then I realized, like, wait a minute, I was miserable every day of my life in that building. I was miserable. How did I not realize how miserable I was? And it was because I wasn't doing anything that fulfilled me in any deep sense. And then I realized, like, well, I need to optimize for feeling good about what I'm doing and forget about the money. The money will come later. And when it comes, it'll be, the right amount.
I always go back to that David Foster Wallace quote about the goldfish, but it bears repeating.
Yes. Yes.
The two goldfish are swimming and the old goldfish swims by and says, "Hey fellas, how's the water?" And the young goldfish say, "What in the hell is water?" And you get yourself in these places where you're putting yourself under this tension and stress without even realizing it. And you have no ability to even acknowledge it until you're free of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It occurs to me when you're talking about freedom that there's a couple different kinds. And maybe the reason that people get stuck is they want freedom from something. Mm-hmm. They feel that they can escape the uncomfortable feeling that we were talking about previously in regards to curiosity. They just want to be safe and not have to worry about things anymore. And every time I've fallen into that trap in my life, I've ended up in the place that you guys were just describing. It's like, what am I doing here? And the other kind, I think, is freedom too. And that requires some self-advocacy, some self-determination, some intentionality, which is both exciting and terrifying at the same time, I think. It's easy to follow the default path. Mm-hmm. And when you decide that I'm going to set my own course, you maybe are surprised at first at how much you can actually influence that, but then the results are up to you. And if you don't get good results, it's your fault, nobody else's.
Right. Yeah. No, that's it. Exactly.
One of the books that I've read about that, which helped me a lot when I was trying to decide what to do in terms of the digital marketing agency that I was working at before going independent, was The Pathless Path by Paul Millard. I know I've mentioned that to you guys. Have either of you read that book?
Yeah, on your recommendation. In fact, he has a new edition coming out. He made a hardback
Yeah, I
copy.
bought it. It's amazing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really, really nice. Yeah, I'm glad to see that message get some traction. And you do have to go into it realizing that there are some things about his situation where he had some, I guess, privileges. I don't know. Like he was in a better spot to make that decision than I was when I made it. So on the one hand, you can look at it and be like, well, it's easy for you to get to that decision because you had this big nest egg or whatever. But that's excuses, for why it can't work for you. And ultimately, you gotta accept the responsibility that
Hmm.
I'm the captain of my own ship. I can chart my own course.
yeah. And honestly, when you grab the tiller, you start with a 1 degree course correction. That's how you get there, and but at some point you have to grab the tiller. And I spent my entire 30s adrift without even realizing it, like Ernie. I think
Hmm.
lawyers are particularly susceptible to this, and people like lawyers because you're right, the career gets in your head, and
Hmm.
like you get so obsessed with winning cases and moving up the ladder and all the metrics of being in that life that you forget that you are an individual, and you just, I don't know, you just lose yourself in it. And I think as a young lawyer, I absolutely just dove straight in without thinking.
Hmm. Yeah, and lawyers worship rationality too much, which is, I mean, it's this built-in assumption that everything can be solved with rationality. And there's a great quote or saying, observation by Rory Sutherland, whose book Alchemy I highly recommend. I don't remember if he said it in that book, but he says it often. He says, not everything that works makes sense, and not everything that makes sense works. And it's true. Like some things work and you can't explain why they work, they just do. But then what do we need to break it down until it makes sense? Why do we have to have everything make sense in a rational way? Sometimes it makes sense in some oblique way. And why are we going to waste time if it's working? Like, great. But then other times, things that we think, well, this should work because this is rational, and then it doesn't. And it keeps not working, even though it's rational. And people who worship at rationality just keep thinking, well, I just got to come at it from another rational angle. When sometimes you got to come at it from a non-rational angle, and then then it'll work. It won't make sense, but it'll work. So I don't know. I just think that's another discovery for me, was realizing it's okay that many things work and aren't rational. I like rationality, but I don't want to like obsess about it.
So we've been talking about curiosity and creativity, but one of the things that you have been known for on the internet, Ernie, is the 80/20 principle. I know you've gone hard on that, and I'm kind of curious, how do you balance those two? Because they're kind of competing ideas, right? Curiosity, I'm going to go try all the new things, and 80/20, I'm going to just stick with the thing that works and get the results.
Hmm. Well, to me, they're not contradictory at all. They actually are complementary, but it's hard to see. So the thing about the 80/20 principle and other things like this are there are things that we observe at the surface, and there are like first order effects, and there are things like that. And our brains are really good at picking out the obvious connection between certain things, especially if it's explicit, if it happens all the time, if it happens with the regularity of, pool balls bouncing off of each other and following the laws of physics. Our brains are good at picking that stuff up. What our brains are less good at picking up, but it's still important, is detecting very powerful patterns that are more subtle, right? So when we talk about the 80/20 principle, people all say, Pareto said that, 20% of the people owned 80% of the land. And you go, that's not useful. That's just kind of like a description of the disparity between some things and other things. But when you talk about trying to get a result and you say, well, what do I need to do to get that result? Somebody says I need to do these 10 things. And if you do these 10 things, you're going to get that result 100%. But what if you only need to do two of them and you get 80% of the result? So what, are you going to spend the rest of the time and energy doing the other eight things to get an additional 20%? That doesn't seem valuable, especially if you can then go get a result somewhere else And it's not that you don't want to be, a perfectionist if you can. It's just that it's not worth it. And there's a example I think of a lot in the book Influence by Robert Cialdini, where he talks about how we can influence other people and persuade them. He uses the example of a turkey mother, and a turkey mother will protect her young from foxes or whatever the threat is the turkeys have, and so they will take extreme action. Anybody tries to go after their young baby, so they isolated. Well, what is it that if we replace an actual turkey baby and have the turkey mother protect it, what are the things that lets the turkey mother know it's protecting something worth protecting? So they created an animal that smelled like the turkey, that chirped like the turkey, that had the same external feeling and texture of a baby turkey, all those things, and they would protect it. And then they started removing them. And it turns out that it's like one little thing, a cheap sound. And you could put like a brick in there. I'm exaggerating, but it was like it's something ridiculous. And then the cheap sound was the thing that the turkey mother isolated on. And his point, and he uses this in the beginning of the book, because people think that they're persuaded and swayed by a bunch of different factors, when in reality, they're usually swayed by just a few. And that goes for yourself, right? So if you're spending all this time trying to get yourself to do something, when really you only need to do these one or two things and you're going to get most of it. And if nothing else, maybe that's the thing that generates momentum. And then you can add other things later. But trying to do all of those things at once as though they're all equally important, not a good idea.
Yeah, definitely not a not a good idea. So how do you personally find that balance? Do you have like a certain amount of time that you give yourself to play with new things? Do you follow your energy and just like, I'm curious about this, so this is what I'm going to do?
Hmm. Yeah, well, what it has evolved into, and this is, not a linear path, but by any means, a lot of, failed experiments and, not failed experiments, just things I tried. This is the creative process. And in the end, what I think makes the biggest difference, the 20% that drives everything else the most, is getting up in the morning and not trying to rush into the day, spending some time reflecting without a purpose, just kind of like have a notepad, start writing some notes, maybe journaling, whatever seems right at the moment, so that it's mostly the same, but not exactly the same every day. And some days something will come up, and like my wife and we've moved to Florida, and she's busy doing a lot of things, and she'll say, "Oh, we need to do this," and I'll realize, like, "Oh, I don't have enough time to finish journaling." And instead of obsessing about it, I just go, okay, well, today's the day I don't journal, and I just let that go. And the letting it go, I think, is the thing that's key, right? It's just letting things be the way they're going to be, and just absorbing what you can and doing what you can. How do you teach that? I don't know. I couldn't have taught somebody else to do it.
Hey, what is that? I don't know who came up with the term daily-ish. It might have been Kurosh Dini, but I'm not sure. But I love the term because it's so freeing. Like all these nerds now, we get these apps, these habit apps. It's like, I'm going to journal every day, and it does a great job of showing your streak. And God forbid you break your streak for a day, and it turns you into just a robot. And I think we all need to give ourselves that kind of forgiveness. You don't have a thing that you do daily, but a thing you do daily-ish. And when you miss a day or two, it's okay, so long as it's a thing you do. And I think so many people lose track or give up on really good daily practices simply because they missed a day and the habit tracker app made them feel bad about themselves.
I do have to confess that there is one thing where I'm on a streak where it's not so much about maintaining the streak, but, and I think it was Ali Abdaal who was the tripwire for this, but I journal by hand, and I like that, just very thoughtful. But then I wanted something where I was capturing at least something of what happened every day. And so I started using day one. And so I've been using it for 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is. I have a huge streak going. And if I missed a day in day one, which is rare, I mean, like, as in I just didn't open it up that day and fire up a new template, I will just go back and create that day. And the most important thing that has to get done in each day is to say one thing I'm grateful for. And I've gotten really good at coming up with some interesting things because I can't use the lame old big ones. I have to come up with, I don't have to, but I want to come up with something that says, oh, yeah, I'm grateful for that person whose name I just remembered that I hadn't thought about in a long time. So that is what the day one journal is for. And then, of course, if I'm traveling or whatever I'm doing, and I will want to look and see, on this day a year ago or 5 years ago, what did I do? I can look at that. But it's easy because it's on my phone, and I can just open it up and create a new entry. And if all I do is put in a picture, that qualifies.
That specificity, I think, is the key to making gratitude work. I also capture gratitude daily, and for a long time I had trouble getting it to stick, and got that piece of advice is don't express gratitude for the same thing twice. And if you go back and look at my entries, you'll probably find some repeats, but what it does is it forces you to find something new about your situation that is actually going well. Maybe it's just me or my personality. I'm not sure I'm not the only one, but I tend to focus on all the things that are broken in the systems of my life. And I'm like, these need to be fixed right now. And it's a good reminder sometimes that it's not all broken. There are some things that are working well.
Yeah, exactly.
Ernie, you talk about 80/20 a lot, and I feel like this is a rule that I find constantly proven true in my life, but I often forget it exists and fall in the trap of chasing the 80. And so often the 80/20 rule to me is hindsight as opposed to proactive, if that makes sense. It's like I finish something, I'm like, why did I do all that when I only needed to do just that tiny bit of it to get the result I needed? And yet I find trouble learning that lesson. When I go into new projects, I don't have the 80/20 filter installed in my operating system, I guess. It just, I still go at it whole hog. And, help me, Ernie, Juan. You're my only hope.
Well, I'll use words you used earlier. I think the trick is, especially if you've been reflecting on, okay, well, this was an example where I did too much, overthought it, overshot the mark, whatever. Then when you encounter something new, say to yourself, I mean, this is a Tim Ferriss quote, like, what if this were easy? Like, what if I could, all I had to do was this? And then here comes the part that you talked about earlier, and then believe it. Truly believe that could work out, and see what happens.
All right.
So the what if this were easy? That question, I love that question, and I think that kind of leads us kind of naturally into the whole topic of AI and maybe your approach to it. Now, context here: you and I have been having calls every month for a while just to talk about the interesting ways that we're using AI, and I've learned a lot from you in those calls. So I really like your approach to this. I feel like your balance of curiosity and what's new and the focus on the results with the 80/20 kind of gives you a unique perspective to this. But how are you approaching the use of these AI tools in your life and business?
Well, I'm experimenting with, all the foundation models, right? So Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, Notebook LM, those are the main ones. I might be missing one. Gemini, Notebook LM is Gemini. But those are the frontier models, and they all do some things that are overlapping, but then they have things that are maybe unique or that they do better. And as I use them all, I know they're all changing, so I experience changes in capability, temporary outages, temporary frustration that the users have with something that they didn't like. But when you're evaluating all of those things at the same time, it can be difficult. But you start to see what's common. You start to see some patterns. And I don't think you can understand AI by listening to people talk about its use. I mean, I don't think you understand anything that way. I think you have to use it, and then you ask yourself, okay, what did I learn there? What am I experiencing? And so, yeah, I'm just using it and trying things. And it's always evolving and it evolves very quickly. So I don't feel like I've ever got a steady hand and I can just kind of say, okay, I'm coasting now. I'm always going, oh crap, they just released some new thing. I got to go check that out and see if that makes any sense. And a lot of times I'll be like, well, it doesn't really make sense, or I don't have the patience to tolerate it's learning it right now. But that's what's great about being in a group of other people, and in my case, it's lawyers, but anybody who's interested in learning to use AI, we just talk about this and we say, okay, what did you learn? And I learn as much from them as they, might say that they learn from me. And of course, they learn from each other too. So we're all learning together. And I think that's the other thing that's important if you're learning AI. Get in a group of people who are not naysaying and nitpicking it, but using it and talking about where it tripped them up and where it helped them and what they hope to get out of it. That's really useful.
And then how are you using these sorts of things? I'm kind of guessing that with the emphasis on what if this were easy, there's certain things that you have to do, and those would probably be prime candidates for using AI tools and automation in general, correct?
Mhm. Well, I mean, the first skill with AI is prompting, which is just asking it a question. And when people, I'm sure there are people out there who haven't used it yet, but if you haven't used it, the first thing you're going to do, because your brain is going to make you do this, is you're going to think of it as a search engine. Oh, I have a question. I'll ask it a question. It gives me an answer. Instead of like, oh, we're going to have a conversation. All right, what's that conversation going to be like? Now, this is where I think for lawyers, especially litigators, I can coach them through something that they understand, which is when you go into a deposition or you're going to examine a witness, especially if it's a witness that's adverse to you, you have to think about how to get them to give you the information that they have that's not controversial first while they're cooperative. And then when you start to become difficult with them and insistent that they give the answers you need, things are going to get ugly and they're not going to, be so cooperative. So you have to think through which questions need to come first and then move on. And another part of it is like doing legal research with computers. You would say, I'm going to ask the broadest possible question and then I'm going to narrow in. Because the thing is, once you ask a narrow question, if there was another pathway you could have taken or that the AI would give you some information about that would be helpful, you're not going to know about that. So it's about having the right kind of conversation. That's the skill. But overall, it's the skill of reasoning, critical thinking, but I call it critical reasoning because thinking is just, thoughts floating through your head. Reasoning is like, how does this make sense? What else do I need? What context is missing? What did I assume that now I realized I shouldn't have assumed? Like you have to be mentally alert when you're using AI. If you're dull, you're going to get dull results and that's not going to be that useful. But in the group of lawyers, it's been interesting to watch the ones come in who were thinking it's a search engine. And then as they evolve, they realize, oh, no, I need to, monitor it, ask it questions in the right way, not assume it's always going to be right. But as long as you are going to be thoughtful and not, take everything it says as gospel truth, it's going to be a very helpful tool. It's only not helpful or not that helpful to people that are not thinking at a certain level.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, those are the people that are going to be most disrupted by it.
Yeah, I remember a while back you shared the Clayton Christensen talk, What Are the Jobs to Be Done? And I've applied that to all of the tools that I use, and it's what I teach with the PKM stack concept is what are the jobs that you're hiring these apps to do? And I had a bit of an aha moment as I was thinking about what is the job that I am hiring the AI agents to. Agents is the wrong word. I was using Claude a couple of weeks ago. And I've always wanted to build these personal dashboards inside of my Obsidian Vault, which used the DataView.js code to scrape all of the data from all my daily notes and show me all of the charts and the graphs and all that kind of stuff. Problem is, I don't know DataView.js at all. And I found somebody who did, and I looked at the blog post they put together, and they explained it very well, but it was still over my head. So I knew that this was possible, but I had no idea how to do it. And I just started chatting with Claude. I'm like, this is what I want to do. I want to create these dashboards. And it was really helpful, not just in giving me the code that did what I wanted it to do, but helping me actually think of other dashboards that would be useful. It's like, okay, so now that we got that one, what do you want me to build next? And, well, geez, I don't know. What do you suggest? And they
Right.
gave me 4 or 5 other ones, and I've kind of gone crazy with it now, and I'm building all these dashboards with all this data, and I love it. It's kind of opened up with these tools, and Obsidian's not the only one that you can do this sort of thing. I know Claudebot is the new hotness right now, and you can kind of build your own productivity system, even your own productivity apps, if you can just think about it the right way and guide it to do what you want it to do.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's just a conversation, so you don't have to have it all worked out in advance. It helps if you have a plan of some sort, but if you don't, that's fine, as long as you're able to react to what it gives you in a thoughtful way. And that's why I say, I think the people that are not doing well with it are people who truly, they just want the answer and they just want the formula. And if it's given to them, they follow it slavishly and they maybe get the result, but then they can't reproduce that result themselves. They, like you need to be able to work out how things might be working. And I guess that's part of it. It's like, it is a black box. That's true. But it's not indecipherable. Like you can make assumptions in real time and be reasonably certain that most of those assumptions are correct. And if they're totally incorrect, then you have to realize, okay, that didn't work, oh, that's wrong. But people who need certainty on an ongoing basis in a really powerful way, I feel bad for them because they won't be able to take as much advantage of these tools as other people can.
And indeed, these tools create more uncertainty than they're used to. So it's actually a net loss if you're not willing to be flexible with this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I think that's the overall theme here today is be okay with things maybe not being okay. And just
being
kind of
okay
ride the
with
wave.
Yeah, being okay with things that you don't understand or that are not determined. I think being okay with them being not okay, some people will push back and the nitpickers and the naysayers will say, "We see, but no, if it's not okay, you can't be okay with that." That's true. You don't want to be okay with failure, but it's not failure. It's that feeling of uncertainty and awkwardness or confusion. And the thing is, look, I mean, how many things, if you could chart, and no one could, but if you could chart through your life the number of things you've been confused by or felt awkward with, which eventually you went on to master or feel completely at ease with, it's a lot of stuff. Okay. So if you've already done it that many times, you can keep doing it. Just ignore the uncertainty part. Just let it go. Don't worry about it because it's the price you pay for getting to the part where it doesn't feel uncomfortable. And it's not a big price.
Ernie, we always like to wrap these up talking about a good book we've read recently. I'm not going to put you on the spot. We'll go first and give you a minute. Mike, what are you reading these days?
I actually just finished The Overthinker's Guide to Making Decisions. Kind of relevant for the topics we've talked about today.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think about this book. There's some good stuff in the first part, but then there's a whole bunch of exercises which didn't really click with me. I like that kind of stuff, but this one just didn't quite fit. I think there's probably quite a few people in the focused audience who would really dig it, though. It's a really short book. It's one of those like woven cover books, like the Derek Sivers books, and the actual text that you're just going to read it like a standard book is probably 80 pages at the most, and then the rest of it is kind of like a workbook to help you think through things and decide for yourself what is actually important. A lot of the same themes we talked about here, deciding for yourself what you're going to focus on and taking control of your decisions and not trying to please everybody and all that kind of stuff. It's decent. Yeah, it's got a Zen Buddhist bent to it, which just doesn't jive with me. But
Okay, Mike. It's rare you find a book that just really doesn't hit with you. That's good to know. I've got one I really enjoyed. I think one of our guests recently turned me on to Nicholas Bate, who writes these tiny books in Kindle, and he just released one of the new year called Tools of Excellence. And he just made a list of all the tools in his life that are excellent and made a little essay about each one. And they're not just tools. Like one of them is emergency cash. One of them is the 3x5 card. One of them is the concept of no. But these are all tools that he has that he gets through life with. And you can read this book in an hour. It's not long, but you're going to get a bunch of ideas going through it. And then I have now started in Obsidian my own Tools of Excellence project, where I'm starting to know my tools of excellence. I don't know if I'll ever publish it, but just for my own reference to know what are the things that I rely on. And I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great book. I think it's like all of like $2. And it's inspiring, not necessarily that you're going to use all of his tools of excellence, but maybe it'll give you some food for thought as to which yours are. All right, Ernie, how about you? You got a book for us?
I have a book, but I have two books really, because they kind of go together in my brain, nobody else's brain, but my brain. And the first one is called The Science of Storytelling by a fellow named Will Storr. The last name spelled Storr. And he breaks down why we need stories, why we crave stories, why we especially like fiction. And he, in the course of it, he'll reference some books, and one of them was Kazuo Ishiguro's book, The Remains of the Day. And I think there's a new book he wrote, there is a new book that he wrote called Clara and the Sun, which my wife had read and said it was great. She said, you should read this. And she said, you'd really like this book. And then I never got to it. But then because of reading Will Storr's book, I said, okay, I'm going to read this book and I'm going to think about what he's saying. And what he basically says, and I experienced it with Clara and the Sun, which is about fictional people, like AI bots that in the future take care of humans. And the humans, of course, disregard the AI bots. And there's a lot of empathy and emotion. But in the book, The Science of Storytelling, he says the reason why fiction is so powerful, and I'm going to try to convince Mike to read fiction now, is because
there's new developments here, Ernie. I read fiction now.
Oh, okay. Well, then think about this when you do, because, and I know this is true for me as a kid, why I liked fiction as a kid, but it's why people like fiction, is that it allows you to see the world from the perspective of somebody else in a way that you could not otherwise do. And movies can't let you do this because you can't get inside the inner dialogue. And when you do, you start to work out things for yourself or understand things in a way you really can't, because nobody can share their inner world with you other than through a book, and specifically through fictions. As a result of that, I said, okay, I'm going to read one of these, authors that he recommends. And when I was reading Clara and the Sun, I was observing how he constructs this person that I'm able to understand, who's completely fictional, and even fictional in the world she lives in, because she's not a real human, and make me feel something for that person. And oh my God, it's just incredible that we're able to do this. And so his book, I highly recommend. He's got a Substack now as well. He's just a very thoughtful person. So The Science of Storytelling is definitely worth checking out. I think you'd like that. And it maybe help you appreciate the fiction that you read even more, because now when I read any work of fiction, I'm constantly looking at how the construction is happening. Like, how are they letting me understand somebody by saying just enough, but not too much? Because you have to give people room to let them create their own, use their own imagination. So yeah, it's a pretty cool thing that we're able to read fictional accounts and create them.
I mean, I think of all creatures, digital and organic, humans are the only one capable of empathy. It's a unique trait that we have, and I think we should embrace it. And fiction is an empathy machine.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I've read a couple fiction books. The first one was Ready Player One, which was okay as a fiction book, but lots of 80s nostalgia, which was fun.
Fun ride. Yeah, fun ride.
Yeah. And then I just finished Red Rising, the first one by Pierce Brown. And that I can see the elements of the storytelling that you were talking about as you're figuring out who this Darrow character is. I like that one a lot. I've got the second one ready to go, but I am currently reading, I've even got it within arm's reach here. Classic fiction, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'm about 30, 40 pages into this one. We're actually going to go see that at the Performing Arts Center in March or April. So I'd never heard the story before, and I'm liking that one.
Good.
All right, Ernie,
Good.
let's do an audible here. Ernie, let's both give Mike some fiction recommendations. Let's both pick one for him.
Okay.
All right, you first.
You go. Me first.
Oh, you want me to go first? I've got one here.
Go for it.
Okay. This is, again, it's light fiction, but it's really enjoyable, and I think Mike would like it. It's a series of books by Naomi Novik, and she used to write for video games, but she turned into a novelist, and she wrote this series called Temeraire, Temeraire, and the first one, I'll give you the setup, Mike. It starts with this English captain in the Napoleonic Wars. He's out at sea, and the difference in this universe is that they have dragons, and the dragons can talk. And so there's a separate, like, dragon corps in the military. And this captain is a sea captain. He's very happy with his career. They capture a French boat that has a dragon egg on it. And the dragon is going to hatch before they can make it to port. And it's a huge deal because the dragon bonds to somebody when it's born. So they like try to get someone on the ship so it can bond to one of the Air Corps people. And the dragon is born, and it's very intelligent, and it decides to bond itself to the captain, who has to then give up his naval career and become the kind of captain and the accompanier of this, or the caretaker of this dragon. And it's a very special dragon. And from there, she goes into a series of novels, and it's very much escapism, but it's just a delight to read. I think, Mike, you would enjoy. I think you could read it with Toby. I think he would dig it. I think your kids would dig this one.
Nice. That sounds fun. I'll check that out.
Yeah.
All right. What do you got for me, Ernie?
I'm going to go with Clara and the Sun. And I'm going to tell you that one way that I will read a book now, and I did this with Clara and the Sun, and I will recommend that you do this unless you don't want to, is because it's so oblique in places, there's certain things that he does where they're talking about things that you don't know what those terms mean. And he doesn't make it easy for you. You're supposed to figure it out. And I got impatient. I was like, I know I'm supposed to know what this means, but I don't quite, and I'm not quite sure. So I just asked ChatGPT, in the book, they're talking about this. What does that mean? And it kind of knew. I think it's gotten better at this point of going, I'm not going to tell you everything, but, since you tell it you're starting out, you don't give me the plot. And it helped me in a couple of different places with that. And then at the end, after I had read it, I said, give me some things to think about from this book. And it gave me a bunch of different ideas. And this is where I was like, I'm not saying you don't need teachers, you do. But the teacher's role is going to be to take what you ask at the moment you ask it. But if you just want, the questions at the end of the book that you should be asking yourself, you can create that with, one of these AI tools. And I do that all the time. And I'll ask the AI, like, what does a word mean? Give me examples of how it contrasts with another word that I know the meanings of, but I just want to be reminded of how they work together. Clara and the Sun. I think you would really like it. Yeah, that's the one.
Just added it to my Audible queue.
All right, I got some homework.
All right. I'd love to hear what you think of those books, Mike. We are the Focus Podcast. You can find us over at relay.fm/focus. You can go there to sign up for the membership so you can deep focus, get the ad-free extended version of the show. Thank you to our sponsors today, and that's our friends over at Incogni and Squarespace. Ernie, where do people go to find what you're up to?
If you just search Ernie the Attorney on the web, you will be led in the right direction.
I think Ernie was the first attorney blogger on the internet.
Yes.
But also, if you're a lawyer out there, I really recommend you check out Ernie's community. Like I said, If I was practicing, I would be haunting it daily. I just think you've made something very special, Ernie, and really happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Secretary what to do while I'm gone, and I woke up and I was gonna say, okay, I literally woke up and I'm like, okay, got to put my suit on, court day, and then like a beat later, I'm like, oh wait, I don't do that anymore.
Relief.
I really do think that there's a strange phenomena when you have a job like that and then you stop doing a job like that. And I'm not sure if you ever get out. You got out of the racket before I did. Have you stopped those dreams yet? Because I haven't.
The dreams have stopped, but I will say occasionally, and so as I mentioned, my wife and I, we moved to Panama City Beach. We're going to go into this 55 plus community. It's a Jimmy Buffett oriented community or whatever. And so there's various meetings we go to with the person installing the shades or, the garage floor, whatever. And as we go to these meetings, my wife is the one who has done all the research. She's really good at this. And I walk in, like the senior partner who doesn't know anything about the case, but who needs to be briefed. Yeah. And so she'll, but so she has so much detail that for her, it's, I think, harder for her to know how to like compress it. But if you don't have the detail and you can just, pull it out of somebody else. So I'll just say, okay, what's going on? She'll explain to me. I'll ask a bunch of questions like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask him this first. We're going to do this. And it's like, I'm sorry, I apologize. This is my lawyer brain reactivating. But it's like, when you go in, you need to make a presentation in a certain way. And it feels good not to have an opponent on the other side. That's the best part about it, right? Because if there's an opponent, everything he said is bullshit.
Yeah, it's funny because I do have that dormant set of skills that just randomly show up once in a while when something needs them.
Yeah.
And I don't mind using them, but
no, right.
I don't want to do that ever again. I don't ever want to do that for a living ever again. I really... The further away I get from it, the more I realize, that's just not going to happen. Like if this whole Max Sparky thing blows up in my face, I guess I'll get a job as a French fry guy at McDonald's or something because I just can't see myself going back and doing that.
Right. Yeah, I see these documentaries. I watched one the other night, some true crime-ish thing.
Yeah.
And, the lawyers, and the lawyers were these guys who were cavalier and, our client's innocent. And like, no, your client is not innocent. And I think that's the thing I could never do well. Like if my client wasn't a good person, I just really couldn't represent them with full zealousness because I knew they were a scumbag, and I just couldn't get over that. But I see people who can do that. And I don't want to hang around those people. I don't admire them or respect them in any way. Yeah. I get that they are doing their ethical duty, but I don't know. That's the part that would trouble me.
The other thing I reflect on, I don't think I'll ever publish it, but I have this long essay I wrote to myself just a few months ago because now I'm several years out. I felt like I have enough, distance to be able to look at that. And I think one of my failings as a lawyer from the very beginning is empathy. It's like I am very empathetic and I see it both in my client, I see it in the other client, I see it in the clerk, I see it in the judge. And I think you really have to like set that down when you're going in to try a case.
I think that's a strength. See, I think if you pick the right clients so that you don't have to worry about, you don't like them part, I think that's a strength because you see the world through other people's perspectives. And how can you prepare a case if you can't imagine what the best case is on the other side?
Yeah.
Right. So no, that's a strength.
But also the empathy comes with such a huge cost.
It does. It does.
When things go wrong, you feel it so deeply where I knew lawyers that I lost the case,
Right.
And
right.
For me, it was like I just got gutted, when I lost.
That's why you were a good lawyer. I mean, good lawyers, they do. I mean, I know you can be a psychopath and be a good lawyer in the sense of winning cases, but I don't think, healthy humans, and God knows they need representation. I don't think they enjoy working with psychopaths. I think they enjoy working with lawyers who do have empathy. And I think there is plenty of room for it. I just think it's hard to see it where it is because it's just not what's celebrated. It's not what the spotlight is put on. But there's plenty of good lawyers who did it the right way. I mean, I was fortunate. I worked for somebody, the firm I was, John McCullum. He was in the third name in the letterhead. Everybody liked him. But he was professional, and he did what he had to do. He was, talk about Yoda. There was Yoda.
Yeah.
Worked hard, did everything he needed to do, had everybody's respect. If somebody didn't like John McCullum, then they, by definition, had something toxically wrong with them. And I don't know anybody who didn't like him, even the ones who are, toxic scumbags.
Yeah. The other thing is, the other thing I wrote in my essay that I was thinking is, I wonder if part of it wasn't that the career wasn't for me, or I had done things, or personal traits for me didn't jive with him, or maybe it was just biology. 30 years at anything, and it's time to repot yourself. And I think you can't underestimate that. You do something for 3 decades, you're just ready to move on.
Yeah, true. I mean, I think if you don't feel that, that's great. That means you chose a profession that really, it was the right one for you. But I feel like the legal profession was not the right one for me. I'm unhappy that I did it. I learned a lot. I don't know what the hell else I would have done with a philosophy degree.
Yeah.
But I think you and I shared. I don't think we are the prototype lawyers.
Yeah. And honestly, the other thing I felt like writing that is I have no regret. I feel like, I did that because that felt right at the time, and my life has been a series of decisions, good and bad, and they've led me to the happy place I am now, so I wouldn't change any of it.
Yeah, you might not have gotten to where you are now if you hadn't done that. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hey, you want to finish there?
I guess, I'll share. So my reflection about law is that, I did like the extension out of philosophy, because what I'm obsessed with, in my core is understanding how things work. And then as I got older and more aware of things below the surface, I was like, well, some things work even though you can't see, how they're working. So you need to explore that. Human nature is the biggest one that was the hardest to figure out because it's not mechanical. Figure out why people do what they do, why people don't know why they're doing what they're doing, why people repeat the same mistake over and over, even that harms them. That was a big learning curve for me. And what was weird was my dad was a shrink. That was like his world. I was like, I don't want to do that. Then I went into the law thinking I'm going to avoid all that psychology stuff. And you can't avoid it. It's like it's everywhere. It's like, and why do judges do what they do? I remember, so this is a war story. The judge I worked for, very smart, very rational, but not always rational because you can't be rational 100% of the time. One day, he was questioning something I wrote, and he said, bring me this case. And this is early, like first few weeks of my clerkship. And he was obviously angry and disappointed and thought I was completely wrong. And I thought, oh my God, I've miscited a case. I'm going to get fired. So I bring him the case. And as I'm bringing it to him, I'm reading it again to make sure, well, does it actually say what I said it said? Where's the disconnect? And I found the language that, he was wondering about. And I pointed to it. And he looked at that. And then he harumphed and he flipped the pages back to the beginning of the thing where the start of the case was to see who the judges were. It was a Fifth Circuit case. And he's like, oh, no, you see, this is not the law. This is just what Judge Tate thinks the law is, who wrote the opinion. I'm like, Judge Tate's on the Fifth Circuit. They're above us. When they tell us what the law is, we follow it. And he's like, no, that's just what Tate thinks the law is, I'm like, okay, they did not cover that in law school. Like, he did not like Judge Tate. If he disagreed with the opinion and Tate wrote it, he didn't feel bound by it. And I was like, this is completely irrational. And I was not prepared for the irrationality of human beings, and judges in the practice of law. And then once you realize, like, oh, a lot of judges are just going to do what they want to do, regardless of what you say the law is or what it actually is. And you just have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, I think that's where we'll end. All right. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.